We've been recording this whole time. Okay, it is 2:00, so we are going to call the regular meeting of the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority to order. First off, we will do the roll call. Commissioner Anderson is present.
Fox here. Edwards. Alternate Seth Gilchrist present.
Alternate Wilson.
Grant Olson. Alternate Burgers here.
Keep going, come on around the table.
Amy Clark,
Mike Shannon.
In the room.
Liz Wilbur, Patty Rosas, River.
Okay, and online.
Catherine Thomas, alternate.
Okay. Ryan.
Colvin Ryan from Summit Strategies here.
Kelly.
Kelly O'Grady Smith, HNTB.
Gabby.
Debbie Smith Wegar, Port of Hood River.
And Brian.
Brian Munoz, RBMC.
Anna.
Hi, everyone. Anna Merrim, JLA Public Involvement.
Jamie. Hey, Brad.
Hey guys.
Mara or Tamara? Tamara.
Hi there, Tamara with Akana. We're running program quality.
Okay, and then David.
You're on mute.
David, you're on mute, or you can say hi.
David McCurry, just public listening in.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Mark.
Mark Greeno, General Counsel to the Bridge Authority.
And Judy.
Judy Verone, General Counsel to the Bridge Authority.
I usually don't do it that way, but I was trying to give Marla time to show up because she's always late. And Arthur was late too.
First time.
Okay, so I'll let the record show that all three from Oregon are present. Only Anderson from Washington is present. So until Marla or Gibson shows up, Gilchrist and Wilson are steading in for them. Okay, has everyone had a chance to review the agenda? Is there any changes to the agenda from anyone?
I have a comment or a change potentially. The agenda had me listed or you were absent, Jake, but it did not register any of the votes that I did in your absence. It just had I votes listed by the full commissioners and then absent for Jake Anderson. I just wondering, is that what we're doing, or
that was going to be on the minutes?
Yeah,
so that's coming up next. We're talking about the agenda.
Oh, sorry, the agenda. I heard minutes. All right, good one.
Right. And let the record show Gibson is present as well. Okay, is there any other changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the correction of the minutes. Now
Yes.
So you voted for everything and we just.
I voted aye, yeah.
Okay.
That should be.
Okay, we need to make those changes so that we can get that signed. Is there any other changes to the minutes?
There seems to be a discrepancy between the executive report and the consent memo attached. It's the difference between 0.5% on the budget that the director makes and 0.05%. 0.05. Okay. I wasn't sure, but we may want to resolve that.
Yep.
Okay.
Consent agenda item B is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Right. Any other changes? Well, thank you all. I wasn't here, so I didn't get a chance. Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next up, we will move into public comment. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Is there anyone who would like to provide public comment? I am not seeing anyone. Also, let the record show Commissioner Keithler is present as well. Okay, with that, we will move into executive reports, co-chair's report. Commissioner Fox, is there anything you'd like to update everyone on?
Yeah, real quick. Kind of a nice notice for everybody. Mike has been voted in as a vice president of HNTB. And we just want to congratulate him. Well, they're an appropriate cut in salary.
That's how that works. Just increases your hours. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's move on to bridge update.
There is one, and I don't know if this is an edit really to the agenda, but the aesthetics committee has a discussion point that we want to bring up. Maybe we bring this up at new business, but it's related to a stipend that we may want to pay or want to consider paying the members of the public that attend that aesthetics committee meetings. So I don't know if you want to put that under action items.
Put it under action items A for new business. There's number 2. You know, you can bring that up during.
I know, yes, I can. The Washington funding, we did have a meeting last week with some WashDOT folks with their headquarters and regional finance group. Talking about the $15 million for this year. We went through and we're very close to the agreement with them for the $5 million in state funding. And we also talked about the process for getting the federal money transferred from WashDOT to ODOT to the project. Because ODOT is the lead financial agency, it has to go to them first. One thing that is pending on that is that they cannot move that money until we have a national budget. So hopefully in January, if that budget gets passed, then they will be able to start that process. But we need to keep an eye on that because if they don't pass the budget in January, that's going to impact the project getting that $10 million from WashDOT.
So that includes if they just do a continuing resolution work.
Potentially will impact that, yes. So we'll need to watch that in January and then make some decisions based on how that goes. Because we will need to get access to that $10 million for cash flow this year. So just making everyone aware of that. The treaty MOAs, we are meeting and speaking more with the Yakima Nation. We do have a meeting January 17th with them, and we continue to meet with Umatilla. We were out there last week and continue to make progress with them. It does not look like the Umatilla agreement will be finalized by the end of the year, but they still are actively meeting with us and recognize the need to get that done. So we're hoping early next year we'll be able to finalize that agreement with Umatilla. Nez Perce is legal is waiting on Nez Perce's lawyer to set up the next meeting with them and to continue to work through their comment on the MOA. And then Warm Springs, we're still trying to get them to come back to the table at a meeting. So we'll continue to focus on those.
So on the Umatilla, the action was we were going to update the proposal.
Yes.
Get it back to them. Did we get it back to them?
We're waiting on their final comments. So I heard back from Joe Thursday of last week. They're still internally trying to work out a couple details. So hopefully this week we'll get that from him. As soon as we get that from him, we'll return the next updated version to Umatilla, which should be a fairly close to final version.
I would suggest after that is done, we turn it loose on our lawyers.
Yes.
So we're not waiting for final.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about with them was we're probably to a point with this next version of having legal start to engage in. We wanted to get most of the details worked out. and before we brought legal in, but we're getting close to that point of bringing legal in on the utility. All right, that was it.
Okay, open action items.
The main action item we're tracking here is the biological opinion. I have a meeting on the 18th with the oversight committee, which is FHWA and ODOT. I'm hoping to hear that that's in legal review with NIMS. If it is, that is the final step. That means we shouldn't get any additional comments. We did spend last week with KMC providing some response to sound issues related to the fish and vibratory hammers, and got them some information on that. So hopefully that will resolve all of their thoughts around that process. And we can get that over to legal and get that finished, January timeframe next year. So.
Okay. Legal report.
Yes, good afternoon. There's really just a few items to update from our report from last month. With respect to the research we were doing on the roles and responsibilities of ODOT, WashDOT, other agencies vis-a-vis the Bridge Authority, we've completed and prepared and submitted to the authority a matrix that outlines the roles and responsibilities of the various agencies with respect to the Bridge Authority, and whatever comments or questions are forthcoming, we'd be happy to respond to them. Hopefully it's useful to give you some guidance as to what the interplay is of those roles and responsibilities with the other agencies. The other, I know Mike has already spoken about the update on the meetings with the tribes, so I don't have anything to report on that. And Foster Garvey is working with the Governance Administration and Operations Committee to finalize the committee structures with those particular committees. Everything else is the update was what we provided last month. There's really nothing new to report on any other new issues.
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much, Judy.
You're welcome.
All right. We'll go next to the lobbyist report. Brad, you're the first one I see.
Sure. We are working with Mike and Jennifer on his team to see if there is a way to pull at least some resource forward from the phasing to try and make sure that we get that whole outlined, I believe, in 2025. Make sure that that doesn't happen. Do not have specifics yet. We'll be working, as we always do, with Senator King on that. I do want to flag with folks, just, and this is more broad brush sort of thing, the inflationary pressures on transportation projects right now are going through the roof up in Washington State. And I expect you'll start hearing both media as well as others just start talking about the kind of exploding costs associated with projects. And it's something we will have to quietly navigate as we kind of move forward. But those are all in process right now. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Brad?
Just one, Brad, the inflationary pressure you mentioned. My experience in working with ODOT has been that in the last year and a half, the pressures have been extremely high, but they indicate that things are backing off a little bit now. Is that not what is happening in Washington State?
At least that's not what I am hearing. And that maybe they've had a couple of projects, specifically the 520, for those familiar with the Seattle area, the 520 bridge, and then also some ferry construction. Again, nothing that deals directly with us, but both of those have seen massive increases in terms of the bids that came in for those projects. They're seeing like huge increases that are catching a lot of people with surprise and sticker shock. So it's just something to be aware of. I don't think that there's anything that we do or change right now. I just want folks to understand that everything is being put under an enormous amount of scrutiny right now.
Thank you.
Fred, just one thought on that is whether or not to keep in your mind is whether or not we should meet with anyone to just make sure they're aware of where we are so that nobody looks at our funding as, unused money that may be available.
Well, I think part of what we, even though it's a 60-day session, so it'll go fast and furious, part of our goal, I know we're not doing a gorgeous night event this year, but I think we will probably try and put together some at least in-person meetings with some folks with the port. And I'll talk offline with you and Kevin on that, specifically to just do an update, a quick update with key policy makers. I think one of the things that we want to do is create an ongoing, consistent communication stream, really articulating the progress that's being made.
Yeah,
and that frankly is as much to differentiate ourselves from other projects as it is, anything else, but we are going to be working on that.
And that'll include the Bridge Authority as well.
Yeah. I mean, correct.
Okay. Katie.
Thanks. I'm sorry. I'm going to stay off camera. I'm in a pretty populated area and I don't want to be overheard. So activity going on in Oregon. Thorn Run's been working on the recipient change for the $20 million and having conversations about opportunities to advance the Oregon funding for the recipient change. As you'll remember, the letter has been submitted to the Ways and Means co-chairs, and I continue to check in with them. As a reminder, Oregon session starts February 5th, and it's the 35-day mad dash. So constitutionally, we have to adjourn by March 10th. And the short session is designated for non-controversial issues for the most part. At least that's the intent. And for minor budget adjustments. So redirecting the recipient fix appears to be a fix that nicely fits into both the minor fix and non-controversial buckets. So we're looking pretty good there. In early January, we'll be circling back with the Legislative Revenue Office regarding the change, just to make sure they have all they need. So we're keeping our foot on the gas there. Was there a question? Sorry.
Up from our side.
No.
Okay. Moving on, I continue to seek opportunities for advancing the funding here in Oregon. I've engaged with both the governor's office and ODOT. I chatted with the ODOT about advancing the bond sales. And as we've mentioned, it's unlikely to happen, but I continue to push. It's still on my radar. And then also looking at adjustments to the STIP. In talking with the governor's office and ODOT, there are not any projects that are suitable for a swap. And even if there was a project, it's a timely process and not a viable tool to be helpful for advancing the funding next year. For the 2024 session, we expect a major investment in housing and not major investment in infrastructure or transportation. The 2025 transportation package conversation is being led by the transportation leadership. So Senator Gorsuch and Representative McLean, they both are very knowledgeable about the project and the funding needs, and I continue to keep them updated on the project status. We do expect to see the transportation package principles any day. And I'm actually right now at a business summit, and Rep. McLean is pulling together a transportation group in about 10 minutes, and she could be releasing the framework at that point. So I'm happy to answer any questions. If we see that framework, I will make sure and get that to Mike, so we kind of know what the legislators are thinking going into 2025.
Any questions?
Katie, we have your letter signed. I'll email it to you today.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. How about our federal lobbyists?
Thanks, Commissioner Anderson. Appreciate it. First, for those I haven't met, my name is Jim Kolb, and I'm joined here with Ryan Bisklowski. Part of your federal affairs team, along with Jake Okenberg, who's actually out on the ground in Oregon and not able to join us today. So, this is the first meeting that we've been able to join you since the unfortunate passing of, our partner, Hal Heemstra, who represented the Port of Hood River for many years. So, we're really honored to have the opportunity to work with you guys and hopefully build a new bridge out there, replace that bridge for you. But, Hal's tough big shoes to fill, but, we're honored to have the opportunity to work with you guys. In terms of, what's been happening here, federally, we just heard last week and we shared with Mike that, DOT transmitted for congressional notification, the rural infrastructure portion of the MPDG grant package. We were just talking with Senator Cantwell's staff earlier today, trying to see if they have any idea on the timing for the mega and infra pieces of that and what the timing is. They weren't sure at this point. I think it's possible we could see one or both of those, be transmitted to Congress this week. So we'll continue to monitor that and see what happens. We're also working closely with Mike and members of the Washington, Oregon delegation to get letters of support for the bridge grant application that is going in. Was it going in early next week? Last week, sorry. So I think we're final on that. We have Senator Murray leading from the Washington side and Senator Merkley leading from the Oregon side, and we should have all the both senators as well as the affected members of Congress signing on to that. We're also working very closely with Senator Newhouse in particular, as well as Senator Merkley, and trying to make sure that as we move towards finalizing the fiscal year 2024 appropriations process, which, hopefully, as Mike pointed out, will get completed here in January, that the 3 earmarks that the bridge was successful in receiving through the transportation appropriations bills will remain whole, and that funding will all flow. Total amount of funding will flow to the authority, once that becomes final. And key point there, you're not going to get earmarks unless there's a final appropriations bill. They do a full year's continuing resolution. You're not going to see earmarks, and the longer this drags out, it's unclear what happens with earmarks. Traditionally, they've kind of put them all together and moved it forward, but we're not in a traditional year in terms of how the appropriations process is playing out right now. That's kind of the things that are happening in the near term, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
With the mega and infra rollout, what exactly does that look like? You said it would possibly be transmitted to Congress at some point soon. What are the steps after that?
Yeah, they're statutorily required to notify Congress 72 hours in advance or 3 days in advance of releasing any of the grants. At that point, you'll start to hear about it, both either in the press or through your members of Congress. They love to take credit. That's a big part of the reason why they have the notification process in place. And then, Mike could probably talk about this a little more, that if you're successful, at that point, there's a process you're going to need to go through with, DOT in terms of trying to get the authorizations in place and the agreement in place to be able to move forward with the funds. So it plays out over a period of months, really. So it's not going to be, that money's not going to get transferred to your account, I guess is the short answer. You're going to have to get agreements locked in with DOT to be able to access and receive the funds and demonstrate compliance with Buy America and Davis-Bacon and everything else that goes along with it.
But if we hear that there's been a transmittal to Congress, that's our 72-hour notice that there'll be news coming soon?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, some of it's gonna come out, once the members get it, once the committees get it, that tends to trickle out more quickly, but it's not official until after that period's over and DOT will do, the president may do a ribbon cutting or something somewhere, that's kind of the official announcement. By then, though, the members will notify the recipients.
Do you think
Normally.
it'll likely leak first? It really doesn't matter, but leak first from Murray?
Or Cantwell. Or, I mean, any of them really. I mean, it goes to the committees and obviously Murray and Cantwell are part of that process. As chair of appropriations and commerce respectively. Murray would certainly notify Merkley as a member of the appropriations committee. So it kind of plays out from there.
And just for technical accuracy, you start with a groundbreaking, not a ribbon cutting.
That's all right.
I learned that in mayor school.
Yeah. I don't even, well, they wouldn't do a groundbreaking. He just would stand there with a big check. that comes first.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, thank you.
Question. So one of these big programs comes out and gets transmitted to Congress. How does the White House decide which projects to start working on first, or what does it take to get priority treatment through that process?
There's no necessarily, they all kind of flow out. I mean, again, Mike, maybe you can jump in on some of this, having kind of lived on that side of the house in terms of how this gets negotiated, but there's no necessarily prioritization. I mean, really, you got to get your ducks in a row and meet all your federal requirements and, all the other things you need to do to get your agreements in place to be able to move forward. And I don't think there's necessarily, they don't do it they do it sequentially. They don't do, kind of work down the list from, A to Z, which one's going to go first. But Mike, if you got more detailed.
Terry, do you want to add some detail to that?
Yeah, I had some detail and also a question for Jim. And that is, my understanding is that MEGA has a 30-day process with Congress. They have to actually notify Congress 30 days, not 72 hours. Is that true, or am I might be misinformed on that too?
I think you're right. I'll double check that. I know for the rural, it was 72 hours, but I know there are some of the programs have different statutory requirements. So
it would be good to know for sure, both for the infra and the MEGA, which are the two outstanding. And then maybe just for information, the Bridge Investment Program as well, because we do have an application pending there. What I wanted to just mention to the group is that once, the political part of this is getting the grant awarded. And then from there on, it's really an administrative process. We then get turned over to the inner workings of the US DOT and depending on the program, quite typically to the Federal Highway Administration. And depending on, the magnitude of the grant, et cetera, I imagine for these big grants, we'll be working with staff in Washington, D.C. But putting together, as Jim mentioned, putting together the grant agreements and getting all the I's dotted and the T's crossed is a process that for a big grant can take 12 to 18 months even. I would hope more along the lines of 12 months for the money to start flowing. So it's not instantaneous, but the good news is the money is yours. You just have to put the mechanisms in place to start using it.
Well, this is Mike. I would suggest that if we're lucky enough to hear, and I think we treat this just like a little mini project, and we set up a schedule, set up
absolutely
the team and go you forth as fast as we can.
Yeah, we've already started contacting and getting people that have done these in the past.
Yeah.
It's good to have somebody that's done it before. One of the reviewers we had, independent reviewers, was also somebody that has reached out and said they could assist us as well. So we're getting some of those in place now. So.
That's the same guy that we used to do the independent review of
yeah.
Well, didn't you guys successfully get the Brent spent? So have you started seeing dollars flow there, or are we in that 12 to 18 months still on that project?
No, we're still in the process of setting up grant agreements on that. So that is just an indication. Now, with that said, the people who are in their face every day chomping at the bit to get money flowing tend to get more attention than the people who just take a back seat and aren't in as big a hurry. And so there will be some sense of urgency in terms of pushing the federal government to turn around document reviews and those kinds of things. That's really the timeline on those things is driven mostly by the time it takes the federal government to review documents that you submit to them. And, you know, they do respond to being pushed.
Okay.
Follow-on question for Summit. Is there anybody at the White House that we can or should be working with in preparation for potentially getting an award? Could help advocate for us?
Well, we had Mike Shannon and Commissioner Anderson, Fox, and Keith are back here. You know, we met with the White House Infrastructure Office, and so I think, you know, we've got good relationships there. If you're successful to, you know, move forward quickly, and we had, I thought, a really positive meeting. They gave us a lot of good insight into kind of their decision-making process. So I think we're teed up and ready to go if they're, you know, if we're lucky enough to receive a grant this cycle.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, thank you very much for our lobbyist report. Let's move on to the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion.
Before that, correction on item B, I think the consent agenda is changing the 0.5 to 0.05.
And so it's 0.5%. 0.05%. So it's not 2.5 million. It's in essence 250,000.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Okay, so with that change, I was going to bring that up as well. In discussion. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Nobody wants to talk about vision or guiding principles?
I'd like to know what review Marla's team has done on that. Is this a version that came out of them now?
Yes, it is. We talked about it, made some roundtable review of it. So it's coming back to you, having gone back through us.
Great.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the consent agenda as amended, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, motion carries. Moving on, committee reports, engineering and construction.
Eric, do you want to do something?
Sure. It's been a little bit of a lull after the scramble to kind of get the RFP out. So it's in the hands of the potential bidders. We have 3 registered bidders, which I think is one more than we thought we were going to get, one less than we would have rather had. But I think we're in good shape there, and all seem to be very engaged on that. I didn't attend, but there was a proprietary meetings last week that I understand went well. So that's kind of where we are on that. And that process will go on into the submission date, which is like January 23rd for the RFP. So that is moving along smoothly. We've also been working on getting the aesthetics committee established so that we're ready to start running on that concurrent with the selection after the beginning of the year. Marla's group's been helping us on the outreach and getting some of that prepared. We went through several iterations on what we're really trying to do and accomplish. And also looking on how do we engage not only some of the cultural organizations here in the Gorge, but some ad hoc members or members at large.
I think a couple of points on that. We talked a little bit about establishing a target end date for submission of ideas from this group. And initially we thought if we're going to try and target 1A to be done in 9 months, not 12 months, 9 months, then we need input from this team by around September 1. That allows about 3 months to incorporate whatever comes out of it into a final scope document going into phase 1B. But we'll let that's a suggestion for the team. We'll let the team work it a little bit.
I think the other important part to really kind of keep in mind on that is that from the initial onset, once this committee gets going, the contractor and design team will also be participating with that. So the advantage of the process that we've elected is we have that continuity going through. So hopefully we're not just taking some ideas and then integrating them, but we're actually integrating those ideas into the design all the way through. So I think that's the opportunity and the challenge that the committee presents, I believe.
And then the other big thing that the team is doing is reading the RFP. So we're ready when the bids come in, we're ready to score it.
Thank you, Amy and Kelly.
Anytime. And then the only thing I would actually add to that report is the interesting, we are getting trained on how to score responses to the RFP. And I think that has been, for me personally, eye-opening. Just as, you know, the difference between a very good and excellent, I think is really, you know, we as a team need to be clear on that to be able to adequately and appropriately score the responses. So I'm really excited. And I don't know if Mike, if you can share anything from the meeting with the, you know, if there is any overarching themes that you had. I did not attend any of them, so I just was wondering if that could be shared out.
Make one comment because I'm getting the eagle eye from HNTV here. I sat through 2.5 of the 3, and for the most part, what I saw is most of them brought their team that they're going to bid from, you know, bid with. So we got an opportunity to kind of listen to them a little bit. And they all seem to be pretty qualified people. So I think we got 3 teams that are pretty strong. We'll see what happens when the RFP comes in and then the orals and so on. But I think we're going to have 3 good bids.
Yeah, so they were confidential. So we told them we would honor that, right? And they are submitting formal questions because nothing shared at that meeting was binding in any way without them submitting a formal question to the website. So we are getting some follow-up formal questions. We will be briefing the committee and evaluators on that at the next committee meeting to just give them some feedback on how we're responding to some of the public questions. The ones that are proprietary or confidential, then we'll keep them that way because we want to respect that as far as part of the process. So.
And that due date is coming up very shortly.
July 22nd. I'm sorry, January 22nd is when the RFPs are due.
But the questions there.
Yeah, the question ending period. The last date is December 15th. Yeah. So this week will be their final submittal of questions.
And just a word of caution for you guys, because I'm getting it. I know teams are checking me out on LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah.
And they're all trying to connect to me. And I'm not connecting to anybody for a period of time here.
Yeah.
Not responding anything. So be very careful with that.
Yeah, they will try to connect with you, talk to you, find out what's in your brain somehow, any way that they possibly can. So don't be surprised if they talk to your family's friends and neighbors. Yeah.
Which one has?
Yes.
The aesthetics committee discussion, we're going to talk about the
so we did on the aesthetics committee add an action item to discuss the stipend for public members. So we were going to add that in.
Yeah, be there in just a few minutes.
Okay, let me ask about another subject. We have an aesthetics committee, we have engineering team. Have we thought about any special focus group on the bike ped?
That'll be part of the aesthetics, I think. there will be a technical element to that too.
I'm talking about the technical parts of that.
I think that'll come from the design team.
My thought was we would do that through the design team, and as they're developing their design and criteria, we'll have meetings specifically on some of the bike ped roundabout, some of those specific elements that we know are going to be discussion points.
I just want to make sure that we bring in, because, designing a travel lane is something that's been done for decades. Bike ped is something that's been evolving over the last couple of years. We have to make sure we get really on top of the state of the art.
No, that was one of the elements, was to make sure we're doing just that. That we've talked about potential variations in bike ped width and striping and all of that will need to be discussed. And really that'll be part of phase 1A. Is at the end of phase 1A, we'll all have weighed in on what that looks like and have a consensus on how we're going to do that going forward.
Yeah, so this is something where people have been coming to me on a regular basis about this, and I've been telling them that we're in the process of a bid on a design team, and that when we have a design team in place, that's when you want to engage.
Yep.
And I've been giving them your name.
That's fine. Yep, we'll engage them for sure.
Great.
With that perfect lead in, we will move into the government's administration and operations. Commissioner Babbitts.
Yes, so we're meeting, we have a meeting on 12/27. But in the meantime, Jake and I had a meeting with Commissioners Chapman and Gehring from the port, and we now have an agreement on a nice descriptive document which describes what we want to accomplish in an agreement between the port and the bridge authority, and that document will be discussed with port commissioners at their meeting on the 19th. And unfortunately, we didn't have it done until last night, so it's not in our packet today, but we can discuss it at our next meeting.
Well, congratulations for getting that done.
Yep.
It doesn't sound like much, but knowing, yeah, it is something big. It's a big deal.
We have just a complete agreement on what we are trying to accomplish. And now it's up, if assuming that the boards ratify it, it's then up to the lawyers to make it happen.
Okay. Let's move into new business. Fiduciary advisor for the HRWSBA.
And I'm going to turn this over to legal. Judy, are you still? Yes. Do you want to summarize your memo on what the procurement options are for these? There was 3 services you identified. See if there's any discussion related to that.
Yes.
Or I can do that.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
You want, Mike?
Go ahead.
Okay. So we were asked to review the procurement process for the authority procuring the fiduciary services, janitorial services, and I guess, Mike, the other one would have been the office equipment. We had talked about that briefly as well. So with respect to office equipment, it was, I think, just copiers and various equipment along those lines. And with respect to that, there's a specific exemption in the authority's rules, which, you follow the Hood River County contracting and procurement rules until or unless you decide to make a change to them. But under those rules, there's a specific exemption that applies to office copier purchases, which means the authority can simply negotiate or select the brand that produces the best combination of performance and cost per copy, and just documents its efforts in considering those capabilities to support whatever selection it wants to make with respect to leasing or renting office copier equipment. Then it's a little bit more complicated when we're talking about the other procurements, although not really. The first one has to do with the procurement of janitorial services. So it was our understanding that the authority has estimated those janitorial services costs to be approximately $70 per week or $3,640 per year. And under the authority's procurement rules, procurements of goods and services that have a cost or value of less than or equal to $10,000 may be procured as a small procurement, which means it can procure those services in any manner that the contracting agency deems to be practical and convenient, including by direct selection or award. And that can be done so long as the contracting agency is not artificially dividing or fragmenting up the contract to get it to fit into the small procurement category. That's clearly not the case here with respect to janitorial services, again, as I understand it. So looking back again at the estimated value of that contract, which would be $3,640 a year, the authority may award a contract, for example, for up to 2 years for janitorial services, which would bring it to a total of $7,280 and still remain within the small procurement threshold. And in any event, which means, again, you can move forward with contracting for the janitorial services with the provider of your choice without utilizing a competitive process, so long as you stayed within that $10,000 procurement. And given the circumstances as we understand it, there's no question here that that the authority would not be in a position where it could be alleged that you were artificially breaking up the contract to get it under those procurement rules. So the small procurement, again, would suit you for the procurement of janitorial services. The next one that we looked at with respect to specific procurement was with respect to the procurement of fiduciary or financial advisory services. Now, under the authority's rules for contracting, again, personal services is a contract that calls for specialized skills, knowledge, and resources in the exercise of professional, artistic, or discretionary or judgment. The qualifications and performance, the history, expertise, knowledge, creativity, sound professional judgment are typically the primary considerations, with price being secondary. So it's a qualitative sort of a procurement or process. However, under the rules that were adopted by the Hood River County, which again is what the authority is to comply with, they have designated personal services contracts specifically to include contracts for services that are performed in a professional capacity. And they've given some examples, such as an accountant, an attorney, an insurance agent, etc. For contracts of those types of personal services, there's 2 selection processes and 1 exemption. So the first selection process would be a formal selection procedure, which would be required, which means you'd have to issue a request for proposals or a request for qualifications, which when the executive director determines that the formal selection procedure is appropriate given the amount of the contract and the complexity of the personal services. However, if that's not determined by the executive director, an informal selection procedure could be used where you solicit responses to proposals from at least 3 qualified professionals. Aside from the formal and informal processes that I just described, there's also an exception, which I think really fits here for the authority when you're considering the kinds of services that you're going to require from your fiduciary. And the exception is where the nature of the services is not project-driven, but requires an ongoing long-term relationship of knowledge and trust. And under those circumstances, there's no need to do any of the processes or the formal or informal services. You can simply negotiate with a professional of your choosing. And the reason I believe it fits within that exception here is because it's based on my understanding of the authority's needs. It requires the authority requires has a need, I'm sorry, for a financial advisor that's not related to a specific or discrete assignment, project, or work, but rather the authority requires ongoing long-term services of a financial advisor to provide it with knowledgeable and trusted advice on a myriad of financial issues that will be applicable to the authority's operations. And given that particular need, under this exception, the authority, as I said, may directly negotiate with a financial advisor to procure the necessary personal services without engaging in a formal or informal selection process. So those are the options that are available to the authority with respect to procurement of the financial advisor and the janitorial services. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So as far as this being under action item, it really was for information because it really follows the bylaw, the governing procurement rules that we've already adopted. But there are some discussion points and I think direction that the board needs to take related to those already accepted rules. So I think there's a couple questions. One is, do you agree with the use of the exception and that you're getting a fiduciary for more than just the project? And if you are, then it's, do you want to and who do you want to move forward with negotiating a fiduciary agreement? We had discussed PFM at the last meeting, but there may be a reason to consider others if you want to. I think that's the discussion for the board is, do you want to pursue someone else? Are you comfortable pursuing PFM? And if you are, who do you want to have do that?
Well, the contract, we can change it over time.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I see this kind of in two stages. Stage one is getting through construction. Stage two is operations. So maybe you think about it that way. So we've got another 6, 7, 8 years at the most for this first phase. Do we want to make a change for that, or do we want to?
Well, you don't have a contract with anybody today. So you need an initial contract with the fiduciary. The PFM right now is only contracted with the port. Now, I don't know if in the IGA there was any language related to this. I think we had at last meeting decided that it needed to be separate. So I think the board should take some type of action to say yes or no that they want to move forward with discussions with PFM. And if you do, then who do you want to have? Do you want that to be through the governance committee, the finance committee, the chairs? How do you want to move forward with discussions with PFM? Or do you want to consider somebody other than PFM?
Well, I think question number one should be, we want to go out and consider others other than our intended path forward.
Correct.
And if the answer is no, then we can stop there.
But you still need to negotiate with them and develop.
I understand.
Yeah, that's the first step.
So I guess that let's open that up for discussion. How does everybody feel about PFM and using PFM, who is the same as the ports? Is everybody okay with that, or?
Just FYI, they are on the call. Mary Francoeur works for them. Just so everybody's aware.
Thank you.
And Brad Gilmano. I don't know if they have anyone else that I recognize right off looking at the names. So I think they are available if it's appropriate to talk to them, but you know,
Do we
just so
know?
you're aware.
Do we know what our alternatives are?
I do not have a list of other alternatives right now, but we could get you a list if you want to see a list. I do PFM, and maybe Carrie wants to expand on this too. I know PFM is a highly recognized, respected company in this field. That I think would be a good alternative, great alternative for them.
I think there's an issue that we as a board have not discussed, and I'm guessing that most of us are not familiar with this space and don't know what process the port went through to select them in the first place, and therefore it's kind of a matter of blind faith for us to move forward with them. It may, in fact, be a perfectly reasonable alternative, but I don't feel like we've done adequate process to get there.
Okay. Would you like staff to put together some alternatives or summary of who's available and bring that back in January for you?
I guess I wanted to hear what other people have to say about my comments first.
Okay.
So help me fill in the blanks here that I'm drawing, but didn't we have a discussion about a legal counsel to help us with bond sales? And
correct, different than that.
That's it, and that's a different entity entirely.
Okay.
If I might, I do think it's appropriate for you to understand the scope of work for a financial advisor, a fiduciary. And I think it would be appropriate for you to direct staff, this is just a suggestion, to direct staff to come back to you in January with a scope of work and kind of present to you what it is that you're hiring and what you're hiring them for. And at that time, we could give you also a list of other potential people that you might consider besides PFM. And we could also give you a rundown on, we could find out between now and then, because I don't know the answer to this, how PFM was selected by the Port of Hood River. I'm sure there was a procurement process of some kind at some time to bring them on board. They have been the financial advisor for the port for a long time. I know that.
I'd jump in there. I wouldn't waste too many calories trying to dig that out.
Okay. Okay.
Today is today. Let's move forward.
Okay. But I do think it would be appropriate for you to understand what is the scope of work that you're hiring somebody for. And then you could make the decision. As Mike said, we're familiar with PFM, we work with them, but there are others, and I don't want to taint that conversation by presupposing anything at this point.
So Carrie, in your opinion, what's the drop dead schedule we need to have this in place?
We need to be working with a financial advisor right now. We have our TIFIA letter of intent has been filed. The next step in that process is to enter into creditworthiness evaluations with the Build America Bureau to start working with credit reporting agencies, and certain aspects of that we can help you with, but certain aspects of that under SEC regulations, et cetera, can only be done by a registered financial advisor. So it is important to get that person on board as soon as possible. So one of the other commissioners had asked a question about bond counsel, and you'll recall it was either at your last meeting or the meeting before, you did authorize, help me out with the law firm's name, but Mark Greeno and Foster Garvey to serve as your bond counsel for these purposes. So that you have already taken care of. The other procurement, I just put this out there since I'm speaking here, the other procurement to be thinking of that's going to come down the pike in a little bit, and it's going to be a not an inexpensive one, is to get on board a investment grade traffic and revenue study consultant. And that is also kind of one of the near-term things that needs to get started in order to meet this TIFIA timeline. And, with fingers crossed, if we were to find out that we got our federal grants in this grant cycle, all of that would shift into very high gear very quickly. We would need to move fast.
Well, we got competing interests in 24. So personally, I think the finance committee, the budget committee's got to take a real close look at this. From adding on additional activities with extremely limited cash flow, knowing that we're about to award a progressive design build contractor that's going to have some kind of expectation for cash flow for phase 1A. We just got to make sure we're not overloading the bin here. And we're talking about money by month now. We're not talking just by year. It's a real cash flow issue.
Yeah, I'm fine with having, letting grants committee take the lead on this. I just haven't, I don't know.
Yeah, thanks.
Say something. Speak.
With the help from HNTB, of course.
I'm more than, we've talked a little bit about this in the Funding and Finance Committee, more than comfortable directing staff to survey the environment to see what's available. So the entire board has a deeper understanding of the breadth of what's available. So we all feel comfortable making a decision. And I understand that a lot of these financial requirements that we need to get done are in direct competition with the RFP and other things we need to get done over this next year. Trying to make everything fit within our cash flow limitations is our primary drive that we're working on right now. Everything, all these questions from my perspective are somewhat secondary once we meet the cash flow requirements that we have coming up soon. So getting the infrastructure bank loan, perhaps using some political power to draw some state or federal funds forward if we can, are the first two things we need to get done in order to meet these other obligations. I'm not sure if the investment grade traffic analysis is on critical path. Carrie can probably answer that question better than I can at this point, but we can find out. So we can find out all the financial critical path needs at this point. My understanding as of today is drawing state or federal funds forward to meet cash flow requirements, and then securing flexible loans should we require them.
I would add to that, and I personally think you're spot on. I think we need help, and I know there's some schedules that Carrie has started that lays out that whole financial plan, if you will. We need to all get really smart on that and see when it really has to drop in. So what I'm concerned about is you guys going out and doing things, and all of a sudden there's this great big lump come in that it's a surprise to it. So we gotta be thinking ahead and watching for those drop points and anticipating them, and then reacting to them instead of.
Those can be forecasted out pretty easily, but without knowing how much money we could bring forward to address cash flow, it's very difficult to just say. Yes,
know that we have a problem.
Yeah.
So the key thing there, and sorry to take a little time here, is that we don't want to automatically turn Carrie on to go do a bunch of stuff without knowing where we are on the money.
Yep.
So that's the key thing, or anybody else.
So yeah,
not just Carrie.
During the fiduciary, we can evaluate, just provide environmental availability to evaluate who we want to use. And that would be fine and appropriate at this time. Does that help answer your question?
It's starting to get there. And so I understand the issues and the possibilities concerning bringing some state money forward in Oregon. And we're looking to get online a line of credit with the Port of Hood River. Should we be looking also at whether the counties and cities are capable of loaning any money in advance? I know that the Hood River County Administrator, who just retired last week, had indicated that he thought that it would be possible for the county to lend money from the timber reserve, the timber interest reserve fund. We have a 10-year averaging of our timber fund. So there's a big chunk of cash that sits there that it would be possible to loan some of that if necessary. Should we be looking at other things? I don't know how dire this situation is, but I know that this is a pretty secure loan, given that we're talking about bringing in money that's already been committed.
We should be looking at any and all options and choosing whichever ones best suit our needs at the lowest cost.
Right.
I see that Mark has turned his video on. Did you want to say something, Mark?
I just want to say we had this discussion in a much abbreviated form a couple months ago. But I'd be happy to work with the finance committee or a subset of directors to describe the best for you procurement approach to securing a municipal advisor.
I'm seeing a lot of heads getting nodded. So am I seeing the consent of the board is that we're going to push this off to the finance committee and we will have a discussion in January with hopefully recommendations at that time. Marla's got a thumb up. Board members, thumb up, thumb up, thumb up. All right.
And also, I'd like to add, though, to the finance committee discussion, the possibility of looking to at least to River County. And I don't know if I don't know what situation. I think you indicated
we don't have a timber reserve fund.
Same situation. No. It's entirely different circumstances, right? But
Understood.
We can start the discussions at least.
It would be nice to see like and regularly kind of a cash flow month over month forecast. It's kind of how we operate our business. You know, you can see when you're forecasting to go into reserve.
Yeah.
And all these expenses.
Based on burn rate, that's sort of.
Yeah, I'm a little unclear on even what the size of the numbers is that we're looking to bring forward for the first half of 24.
Yeah, the date is right around May 1st, June 1st is the problem.
What's the size? Is it a $500,000 or is it 5 million?
Varies because we don't know what we're going to get charged in the EBD, but I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $10 million is what we're talking about.
I'd also volunteer if there's a group or if if there needs to be support to build out some different scenarios. Like that's typically how I've approached situations like this where there's a lot of uncertainty. It may be worth building a couple different models that say, okay, this is what option A looks like. This is what option B looks like. Move around a couple of these different revenue and cost numbers so that we have plan A, B, and C depending on what the future looks like, and make the cash flow model as granular as we need it to be.
I thought you were going to offer to lend us $500,000. I mean, $500,000.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to.
So out of your account.
I think Brian's going to be a very key resource for your team to really understand how things are moving around.
Yeah, we meet next week on Wednesday, so please get us information or have it ready to go by.
Yep. We've started some of that. I'll get with Carrie and Brian. We'll get some of that pulled forward and walk through it, what we've looked at.
Might be a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we'll walk through the unknowns and knowns and, scenarios. There's a number of them. A number of them are, what if scenarios, but we can run through where we might have money and where we do have money.
So there was one other part of this that was a question that I think is good for them to have answered, or at least a consensus by us, is that Judy and Mark have done their due diligence that we can go direct to PFM. And if that is an option, is that something everyone feels comfortable with that because some, like in Washington, we usually wouldn't do that,
I mean, are we comfortable with that style of procurement?
Yes, if that's the direction that we want to go, is everybody comfortable with that versus otherwise we got to start spinning up a couple other things. If we're like, no, we don't feel comfortable doing that, well, then we got to start down the other side of the procurement process.
I am, but I think when we had the discussion on Friday, Mark had suggested that we need to document, or we need to establish some findings associated with it. And I know that that's similar to the way that the county deals with this. Even though it's permissible, we need to explicitly state that we're doing this and why we're doing it.
We can put together.
I do think we want to, create the record that you're complying with applicable law. But I think at this stage, what we were hoping to get out of this conversation was if anybody given the option of engaging in a more robust procurement process with more formal procedures, does anyone feel that is appropriate or for political or other policy preferences. And so if we came back in January and said, yes, you can do this, I guess I'd like to know if there are objections to proceeding along a streamlined process or a direct process earlier rather than later.
So I guess
go ahead. I'm for a streamlined approach as long as it's legal. Streamlined approach, and we're not locking ourselves in for
forever. And so I guess from my looking at it from the political standpoint, so long as is everybody, you know, if we're doing the streamlined approach and there's no conflict of interest between the port and us, absolutely, I'm fine with it. In fact, I see more positives than negatives, and hopefully some cost savings than making sure it's the same, because they're the ports, in essence, managing our money.
Does the board want us to bring in January alternative companies and the scope that Carrie talked about and have that discussion in January?
I'd suggest that we leave that to the finance committee to, as they'll have a better understanding of what options they've looked at. We can do that. Like to see them play with that.
We look forward to your recommendation
next week.
Well, Carrie, did you hear that? We're going to have that conversation next week with the finance committee.
Next week we are. All right.
Yes.
Guess I better get busy.
Carrie, give me a call.
You to make the decisions on janitorial service and copiers.
Yeah, so the copiers we're moving forward with, the janitorial services we can move forward with. Yeah, those are under slightly different. There's not really alternatives there. They're under slightly different, clear direction on that.
And they're pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just impressed that they found janitorial services that inexpensively. So
yeah, well, luckily
you're not going to do any better.
We're kind of an add-on to she's already coming here. So
but you're not going to do any better, I'm sure.
Before anybody asks for her name, we're going to move on. Yes. Okay, we're moving on to the aesthetics discussion. Who wants to start that out?
Do you want to? You want me to start?
I think I said my piece to start there, so maybe you.
So I'll summarize. We are getting the aesthetics committee together. As part of that, we talked about it at the last meeting or last couple meetings about having a public participation in that aesthetics committee, and we identified having 2 people from Oregon, 2 people from Washington, general public as part of the aesthetics committee. We're getting ready to put out a kind of an invitation for people to participate. And as part of that, one of the things that was discussed was, should we provide a stipend to the people, general public folks that might participate in this, to reimburse them for some of their costs of participating on this committee. Before we move forward with that, I thought it was good that the board discussed that. Right now, what was on the table was $100 stipend for each one of those members, which we're looking at 4 meetings, which would be about $1,600 to have them participate. That felt a little high to me, but if that's what we want to do in order to get participation, we can, but I just wanted the board to be aware of that and have some discussion about whether or not that's what we want to do.
When do we expect the meetings to take place? During the workday or in the evening?
I don't think we've set times up yet. That would be part of the first committee meeting would be in January, where we would get kind of the first group together. And I think part of that would be setting that frequency up. We've got some recommendations on frequency, but setting that time and location would most likely be here. But the time we would need to work out was convenient for the majority of the members of the committee.
And I think we've made it more challenging by including one part of the group are those that are representing their entities. And now we've added this group of concerned citizens, which is kind of a different tier. And then we're also going to have whatever consultants that we have attending those meetings too.
And you'll have travel
push to make it probably during the business day, which is for public participation is not ideal.
So I've had a fair bit of experience in trying to get people to sign up for committees and this sort of thing. And there is certainly a general move nowadays that the concept is that if you offer a stipend, you can get people with broader set of lived experiences, and you can cover costs of childcare, that sort of thing, so that people who have jobs, people who have kids at home, whatever, can participate. And I think it's a good concept, but I think that this is not the example of where I would apply it. I would be more interested if we were talking about a planning commission or that sort of thing. I'd say, yeah, we should talk about things like the city of Hood River covers childcare expenses for commissioners and committee members. I think that it makes more sense to limit it to cases where it's actually needed, as opposed to giving someone $50 for showing up like it's jury duty. And I think that this being a very limited period of commitment, and being that we're in the Zoom era, I believe that we're not asking people to travel, we're not asking people to commit a large amount of time. I think that we can do it without a stipend. Just my thoughts.
Looking at it from the other side, I appoint a lot of people to a lot of different committees and no one gets a stipend. And whether you're acting as an agency or whether you're acting just as a citizen, nobody gets stipends. And I don't know about starting that since these meetings would be in the county, is just the start of it. So for me, it's a hard sell to do that. And then how do you give an individual a stipend, but not somebody who's working for an NGO, where the NGO says, well, we still have costs too, and we're volunteering our time. So to me, it's a lot easier to say no. And I think, as you said, you can always get people to volunteer. And I think there's going to be plenty of people volunteering. If you get nobody saying yes, well, it might be a little different.
I think you're going to have more than enough people being interested in this topic. Probably more than we want. So,
and you really think you're going to get it done in 4 meetings?
That's where we're going to start. We'll see.
First week. Yeah, thank you.
But it is a pretty limited scope, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the key. We gotta make it limited and keep everybody in the box.
I'm pretty good at that.
So here's a question that I've got, and I don't really know if I want to raise it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Our environmental permit that we're all driving towards, a ROD, it's expired. We need to get it extended. Okay. Does this open us up to, here we go again, we're gonna go with a cable stayed bridge and a tunnel under the.
No, I mean,
how do you keep it in the box?
So what they've done is, and I don't know what we've ended up calling it. We were calling it a purpose of need or a guiding principles or whatever we term it. At the end of the day, defines what this group is to do. And basically, it was the architectural a memo on guidance for the aesthetics for very specific features. So we stayed away from any reference to design or implementing any design, but it is just a memo of recommendations, because that's what it was limited.
Preferred option.
It's based on the current preferred option or any modifications that the design team would make. And then the point of having the design building designer and contractor involved is to have them provide good feedback on cost impacts of whatever gets proposed. But we are trying to keep that.
If I may, we've got a hand up as well from Catherine.
I had a question about the paying for committee. Is it possible, because I do think having a committee in the middle of the day for somebody, it would potentially be a financial hardship for them. So is it possible to maybe have it request basis, where it's like a request basis for that being compensated? Otherwise, I do agree that if we start paying people to be on committees, and we are also in the same breath discussing cash flow issues, I think that might be, and I know $1,600 is a lot different than 5 million, but every penny counts. And the second thing is anybody from WSP on this call that we can talk to about the ROD, or is there anything, because we have a lot of these questions about when this decision's coming and the expiration date, and it would just be interesting to hear their perspective. Over.
We've got Anna.
And she's not from WSP.
Right.
So.
You're on mute.
Yeah, hi everyone. And I didn't know if you wanted to take a moment to address Catherine's question before I start speaking.
I don't think anyone from WSP is online.
We do not. Yeah, we can invite them. I think we've got a good handle on where we are. With it.
But I think there's a process for getting the rod expiration extended, and we have to go through that.
Yes, we may, I think what I would say is we may or may not continue with them once the PDB team's on board.
Right.
So I think right now, I think we've got the information we need for that.
But the extension doesn't, if it goes till the end of January, it doesn't mean we got to start all over.
Absolutely not. No. And we've had that conversation. I hate saying we got information from the feds DOT because you guys all look at me like, yeah, we've heard this before. But
yeah, let me
so we did have a conversation with them that this, and they felt that this would be a very minor edit because we are at like 95% and we're really not done. So we can't, like, how can we modify something we're not quite done with? So it really is just a confirmation that nothing has changed. That I think if these are not completed by the time the PDB gets on board, any edits that they would have, we will have to bring into this anyways, but none of that should open us up to having to relook at everything. It would be
word of caution, as you said, should.
Why? Because I can't give you.
I know.
But again, though, the reason that the rod is not done is not due to us.
It is not.
To the feds themselves. And
Correct.
so if they were not willing, or they were like, no, you got to go back to the drawing board like a contract, because you didn't extend it, so you got to go out and do a new one. That's not where
everybody understands that.
They are all aware of where we are.
Okay.
So,
all right. I think we're good there. The conversation. What?
Yeah. So
yes.
Stipend, I propose no.
Okay.
Could I just have a moment to speak on that real quick before we?
Yes, you were the one that proposed it in the first place, I believe, correct?
I'm not sure if that came from us or someone on the aesthetics committee, but I just wanted to, make a note from a public involvement perspective. This is best practice. It is one of the best ways to ensure diverse perspectives. And it's just really a good faith effort to equitably engage the public. And if you're offering everyone that, everyone from the public, that same stipend, it just becomes very equal, and it really helps encourage people who would otherwise not be able to participate to be here. And so, and in the grand scheme of things, it's really not a lot of money to be able to point to this thing that, like, we're really working hard to equitably engage the community. So that's just from the public involvement perspective.
Equitably, we're saying that someone would change their work schedule around and miss out on an hour or two of work. And we think that those people with those jobs are going to be able to influence their work schedule to be able to get that time off.
Well, so
sorry, I'm just
yeah.
I don't disagree with your comment. I just don't think it's realistic.
Let me throw out, because when I first saw this, I was dead set against it. And as I thought about it more and seen committees around the county where people do participate, you get a lot of retired individuals. You get a lot of individuals that are single. You get a lot of individuals that have freedom in their schedule, or they're self-employed. And I think part of the idea of doing a at-large representation was to get some sort of representation that was other than that in the county. Because of that, I've started to, it seems like a stipend, maybe it's not the total answer, but at least starts to give a little freedom to somebody who's a single parent and maybe they need to break out. The whole issue of when the meetings are and how you hold them, I think when we get down to those brass tacks, there's going to have to be a push to move those later in the day or at the end of the day or something like that to make them effective. So maybe it's not the final answer, but I think it's perhaps a piece of it. And I kind of came at it from 180 degrees and said, you know, we're not getting anything. Why should anybody else? But I think that to support what we're really trying to achieve, we need to do something a little bit different for those 4 pieces. So
There, people are.
Yeah, I was going to echo just a lot of what Eric actually just said, and Anna, and I think Arthur earlier. I think we just did approve our mission, vision, and values, and one of those is equity. And I can see both sides, but I would be saying at this point, recommending no, based more on the fact of where we are as an organization and financially what we can actually like take on, but also recognizing and aspiring that at later opportunities when we are trying to engage the public, I do agree that if we are trying to equitably capture input from the whole community, this is a space that has been shown to acknowledge and account for what we are asking people to do, which is add this into their day and their schedule, and appreciate that if we want people who aren't their own business owners or consultants or self-employed, acknowledging that there is a cost attached to people's time, I think is beneficial. But I also am conflicted because at the city, we are not paying stipends to all of our committee and commission members. We do offer childcare reimbursement. So I think ultimately it can be different based on what we think the need is for the authority. But it's also hard to be considering like a cost allocation right now when we are actually not having any cash to be pulling from. So my recommendation is more in line with the comments that Arthur shared early on, not a perspective that this isn't a door we should open. I think it's a door we should open when we are well situated to be able to set that example.
When you say set that example, you mean paying commissioners?
I mean, setting
members?
the example that if in the future the authority is looking for public input and asking people to give their time, do we follow suit like the city of White Salmon and Hood River and offer a childcare reimbursement or stipend? Or do we offer just a general stipend as an acknowledgement we're asking people to take time out of their schedule to add this onto their plate?
In the looking at time and looking at, I hear absolutely, Eric, where you're coming from, and looking towards more of a consensus rather than having us take a split vote. Would everybody, and hearing what Ann had said, would everybody be okay with the offering of up to $100 for childcare reimbursement for anyone that is one of the at-large members of the aesthetics committee?
I would add bridge toll.
I don't know if anyone is actually being paid for childcare currently, but as somebody who is active, like $100, that's great. I think I 100% think that we should ensure that there's equitable and diverse individuals on the committee. And I think that if we did it, not necessarily by, I don't say case by case basis, but there will be people on that come that don't necessarily need the compensation, and they're not doing it to be compensated. And on the other hand, there are people that might come who need the compensation. So would it be a consideration of the commission to have it be, we have this stipend for anybody who would like up to, and I would say more than $100 because childcare is expensive and the bridge tolls are, you know, not.
I meant per meeting.
Yeah.
I meant per meeting, Catherine.
Oh, yes. Okay, sorry. Yeah, $100 per meeting is a lot different than, I'm like $125 per meeting. That is like, what childcare do you guys have?
I know, I want that name.
So just keep in mind that this is mentioned in the post that will go out to solicit members. So part of that, I think part of the idea, and help me if I'm wrong here, Ann, is that those members who maybe have those barriers to participating can see that they may be alleviated before they're actually doing a submission. And to be honest, I don't know what the right answer is.
The hope is that we get a better outcome. Correct.
So are we gonna word it that says something like, we'll reimburse childcare while you're in the meeting and a bridge toll if you need it, up to a maximum of $100 per meeting?
That would be the
However,
revision, that would be the revision that would be made.
And this
Well,
is
yeah, I
only,
mean, I would say like on implementation, the administration of it, it is a cleaner way to just say it's a stipend and set that amount. And then for the person who needs it to cover their childcare, or the person who needs it because they now forego an extra shift or whatever, like, yeah, because then it starts to get divisive of like, it's only to the people that maybe have, I don't know. I can see it becoming another can of worms, and also worry about staff if they're sitting there having to like check, receipts and the audit trail, versus a policy where you're setting the amount and that's what it is. And it's going to everyone equally that's carrying the positions that get it.
Okay, so anybody from the outside going to this meeting gets $100.
Potentially. I think that's what's on the table, right?
That is the consensus, though. That's not going to work.
I'm just worried that we're setting a precedent here.
I don't have a problem with setting a precedent, but we're setting the wrong precedent.
So let's change the question. The question is, we want equitable participation. How do we do that? We're asking for 4 at-large members from our community, and we want to make that as diverse as possible. How do we do that?
We have 2 models that 2 of our cities have selected, which is that they will reimburse for childcare for participants to a certain amount.
Okay.
And that's, I think, what Jake suggested. And I suggest that, being that that's the broadest model that any of our local governments have done, that we adopt that now, and then we talk in the future about, when we have actual cash flow, we talk about the possibility of doing what I think all the counties and cities should do, which is they should pay people to participate in the positions that we're not seeing a good equitable representation in, because only the retired people and the single people can participate. But let's start by doing what the 2 cities have done.
so we've got a comment from Debbie, and I'm trying to keep
I'm sorry. I just wanted to jump in here because I really need to research this. I believe that stipends have to be paid through payroll, and we currently don't have a payroll system for you. And so I need to double check this, but I believe that the IRS requires that. I know that they require elected officials to be paid as employees, even if it's just the $100 a month like the port commissioners get. So I need to research this to find out how we can do it.
That is not what I read on the internet.
Yeah.
Debbie,
That's a good point.
but,
I mean, it
but
also,
Debbie, if it's a reimbursement for something that doesn't go through payroll, correct?
If it has to be what the IRS refers to as a qualified plan. And so that means that you can get reimbursed for actual expenses, actual mileage, those kinds of things. That's why the reports that you prepare and submit to the port, those are very specific about what you did. You have to have receipts, or you have to show mileage, you have to show all of that. If you are getting like a per diem, if it's out, so the IRS allows their per diems if they're allowed under the General Services Administration. But if we just said that we were just going to pay you $100 for going to a meeting as an expense reimbursement, that's not considered a qualified plan, and that is taxable to you.
Right.
But you said actual expense up to $100.
That's why I said that. So that's why I said a reimbursement, because that goes through that different process. At least that's how we do it at the county.
Okay, so yes, if we are, that's why I wanted to clarify it. If we are actually reimbursing, so if they show that they have childcare expenses and the tolls to go across the bridge and things like that, if they document that, you can reimburse them, and it would not need to go through a taxable process.
Okay, so that was what I was trying to get at right there. And then the people that need it can ask for it, and then the people who don't want to go through the paperwork or don't need it don't have to. But at least it's still there for the equitability part.
Okay, thank you.
Anna.
Yeah, hi, just on the stipend versus reimbursement. So that as currently written, we have it as $100 stipend. And my understanding is that JLA pays these stipends all the time, and that we would just JLA would write a check to the individuals, and we would then charge that, to the project. And so because it's such a small amount, we would not need W-9s or anything like that. And this is something that we do pretty regularly, is my understanding. And so JLA could just handle the finance part of that.
Thank you, Anna, for how JLA does it. Okay, so we have stipend, which we'd have to do more on, and then we have reimbursement. Can I get a show of hands? Where are you guys feeling on just saying no and forgetting it? Okay, online, nobody? Who thinks that we should do yes on just a stipend? Okay, who thinks we should do reimbursement for actual expenses for childcare? Up to $100 per meeting. Right. Okay. All right. I think that is consensus. So long as Jacobs, you're okay with that meeting in the middle.
How long are these meetings going to be?
Arthur's there, so it could.
Hey. Well, I mean, up to $100. I mean, that's kind of where we go. You know, yes, childcare is expensive, but if this is an hour meeting, you know, it's a very large amount of money.
I think we've got them all set up. There's a 4, and then there's
okay, we're
2 hours
around, but it's still a lot of money.
I think it's going to be 2
to 4 hours
minimum.
Okay.
Depending on, because you're going to run through concepts and probably bring in things and have people look at them.
I think whenever you put 16 people in a room, it's really easy to blow through 3 hours and letting everybody introduce themselves.
And so the second piece of discussion on these aesthetics committee meetings is Mike was asking, how do we keep it from being something which blows up all the discussions of all the other elements of bridge design, everyone's cable stay bridge with lighting and flashing in different colors for different holiday seasons and stuff like that. And so what we talked about there, excuse me?
It's a good idea.
Okay. So what we talked about there was number one, in the outline, it's described what the scope is. But secondly, it's also mentioned that is within the limitations of the scenic area. And that I would expect that probably at the first meeting, we would have someone from the scenic area explain the concept of visual subordination, which says that you can't light it up in green for Christmas, et cetera. So I think that we'll be able to get through that relatively smoothly, assuming that people take no for an answer.
That's the one thing that kind of keeps me up at night on that committee. This thing getting out of control.
And it's limited by what NEPA also dictated they would be providing. So I think
you and I should talk about that, because I went through that document and there's like 4 or 5 items maybe.
Yes,
and it seemed to me there were more than that, but
not a huge list of items.
I think there's a preamble that also talks about the preferred option, and we're not building an iconic bridge. That goes with the Scenic Act, and what we're doing is serviceable and manageable.
I use the exact example that you did. Every single person I've talked to who's looked at the artist's conception said, the bridge is ugly, we should have and then they give an example of a cable stay suspension bridge. And I explained to them that would cost about 10 times as much money, and therefore we can't have that, sorry. And they say, oh, okay, never mind. And so we'll have that discussion. It's going to happen, but we'll get through that.
Okay. I think we came to consensus. We're now continuing to beat on it, but it's a good conversation.
Violent agreement.
And it's violent agreement, yes. We were going to move into informational items now, unless anyone has a last thought on it. Hearing none. Mike, do you have anything on the informational items or
just
updates?
Real quick on the informational items. There's a presentation tomorrow I'll be giving to the Columbia River Gorge Commission. It's just an update on the project. We've talked about the next steps on the RFP. The housing presentations, I've got contacts for the Washington side. I'll follow up with you, Arthur, after the meeting to get contacts for the city and county. And then also if someone has a contact for Mosier, and I'll get those from you after the meeting. So that's it.
Thanks. I don't know about the rest of you guys. You probably get just kind of general questions on what getting a bridge update. Would it be possible from the communications group to get some sort of general update so that we can, any of the commissioners can give a quick 15-minute update.
Okay. Yeah, we can provide that for you.
Thanks.
Since you brought up the communications committee as well, I know I'm following us on Facebook and I see Anna or whoever's putting stuff up. But there's not many people following the bridge. And so like you might get 1 or 2 likes. And I know we'd asked the port to push on that as well. But we'd also talked about maybe doing sponsored posts to get to spend a little bit of money to start drawing people to our Facebook page where that information can get out. So less people are asking you. Anna, are you there? What are your thoughts on what are we going to do for that public engagement to get that?
No public engagement, just put it on X and say that this is all about toll bridge. We think people should pay tolls.
And then tag I-5, what?
Yeah, thanks for the question. You know, at the end of the day, we're not worried about likes so much as reach or impressions or how many people see the post. A lot of these posts, people aren't gonna like it because it's not you know, a cat video, honestly, or it's more informational and it's a little dry. And so really the most important thing is reach or the number of people who see the posts. And that's honestly looking pretty good. We get more followers on Instagram all the time. I get those notifications on my phone. I see that a lot. And we're getting great engagement on LinkedIn with more of the, you know, technical side with folks and the potentially lawmakers who are going to see those posts. And so I feel like, you know, boosted or promoted paid posts are fine. It would be my, you know, recommendation to kind of save that for when we have really, you know, for instance, like we have a very specific need, like we're trying to recruit people for this aesthetics committee. That's when I would put the money, you know, towards these social media posts rather than just to like get more followers, because we are getting more followers every week just naturally because we're posting FAQs, we're posting news as we have it or updates as we have it. So that would be my recommendation as someone who has been running social media campaigns and accounts for 15 years now. Yeah.
So for my request then, Anna, for your next update at which we don't have this month, can we see how many impressions and likes or, you know, the reach is on that?
Yeah, I would be happy to do that. I think I was doing that a few months ago and stopped, but I'd be happy to do that again. And we're also going to work on, after we pass the end of the year mark, we're going to put together a full 2023 communications report for you all to review. And so that will be, you know, newspaper or newsletter opens and clicks, a full roll up of social media results, in-person events, all that. So you'll really be able to see, and also like website views, all that good stuff. And so you'll be able to see that from a really holistic perspective and to see how the social accounts have grown over the past year, which will, I think, be really exciting.
Great. We look forward to it. And Commissioner Fox had just asked, he'd like to see those monthly.
Add that back in the bridge.
Okay.
Yeah, we had been putting them in there.
Yeah.
They kind of got
Yeah,
stale.
I'd be, you know, that stuff, it does take like an hour to put together. If you guys think that's a good use of our time, then we're happy to do that.
Why does it take an hour? Doesn't the system just spit it out?
You know, going through all that stuff and looking at maybe an hour is an overestimation, but like if you want it for social media and like any emails we've sent out, it just like you have to go to these places and click around a bunch to get the right configuration in terms of like which metrics you're looking at and for what time period. And so it takes, I would say, at least half an hour for social media. And then if you want anything else like newsletter opens or website page views, all that, and then to compile that report, it really takes an hour to do that report every month. And that's honestly why I stopped doing it, because it was taking too long.
Why don't you do it for the month? And then let's take a look at it for frequency.
Okay,
We
sounds
haven't
good.
seen one in a little while that
Yeah.
I remember.
And one thing I could do too is if it makes more sense to do it quarterly, I could do that if that sounds good.
We have the end of a quarter coming up, so that's good timing for that. And we can take a look at a quarterly report and then decide if that's what we want to see. Michael forwarded me the engineering report, the geotech report, and I read that, and that was really interesting reading. So I suggest that anyone who hasn't read it might want to take a look at that.
Yeah, just let me know. I have to send it to Dropbox.
Right, it's a big file.
Really large, so,
Yeah.
but yeah, if you're interested in it.
This is still a draft, right?
It is, they'll be finalizing it in the next week.
And when it's finalized, will it then be hosted on the website or not?
Yeah, we could put it on the
Okay.
website. It's out in the procurement documents already. But we'll also
Right.
put it there, so.
Right, okay.
So you find it fascinating. Would everybody else find it fascinating?
Well, one of us probably would.
I enjoyed reading it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed
Catherine-
reading it. Yeah,
Good.
it was pretty
Thank you.
awesome. It's,
Thank you, Catherine.
Maybe that's the easiest thing to do is get the Dropbox and give it the link to everyone.
We can do that.
My new favorite.
Yep. I'll send it to everyone.
Okay. Anything else on informational items?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's one on the very last page of your package. Debbie put in the current
Total revenue.
full revenue,
Didn't add up.
and there's a math error there.
That didn't add up.
There was a revised version sent out
Okay.
that should be 985,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sent out a revised version.
I did that math too. I was like,
Yeah.
we said it was over $1 million, I thought.
But it's good news.
It is. We're almost at $1 million.
It's going in the right direction.
It's on target, right? This is what we were expecting. It's nothing, it's not above or below.
It's amazing how much of a decline you see in November.
Yeah, that's one thing I was gonna
Everybody's gone.
point out. I mean, it was almost $100,000 less than.
Huh?
We also had that bridge
We shut the bridge down for 4 days. That's a lot of lost revenue we have on the bridge being closed.
And it being off season.
Right. Yeah. Concern. Okay, upcoming action items. You don't want to talk about any of that?
Can I ask a request? Can we look at, when we look at year-end numbers, can we do it, can we see month by month for previous years as well? Be curious just to see how things have trended, if we see any kind of any impact from the increase in the bridge tolls.
Are you talking about poll numbers?
Yeah.
Debbie, are you still on?
I am on, and yes, I can pull those reports together for prior years. Obviously, the dollar amounts won't make a lot of sense because this is focused on the increment that there is. Although I do split it out between the old revenue and the new revenue, so I can kind of recreate this report.
You can look at the cycle.
But obviously, it won't have the new rate revenue in there, and so you can see the traffic and then also see what the old revenue was over each month.
Or Debbie,
Now
if it was easier to just pull crossings, I don't know if that's possible, because then we kind of factor out all the rate increases.
Yeah, and my one question is, do you want it broken out by type? I have to break it out by January. I have to break it out by type.
January or
report.
February.
So
makes sense to me.
That's great, Debbie. And the only other thing I can ask is with the port reducing the loads, and then you're looking back at those years where they were reduced, would you be able to help us give a better estimate of how much loss that's going to cost us for the next year if we follow the same trend?
I can take a look at that. Now, one of the things that when we're looking at history now is that we're going to hit the COVID impacts pretty quickly. I mean, I can go back a year and it'll be probably pretty comparable, but when you get back into 2021, you're going to be back into the COVID impacts. And so, but I mean, I'll just put the information together and then we can take a look at it. How is that?
Commissioner Gibson said on trucking, though, you don't see much of an impact in 2021, and that's what we're hitting is the trucking.
Yeah. And for trucking, that's fine. I just meant the original request was to go back and just kind of get an idea of how traffic is trending. And so on that, when you look at cars and and the small trucks, you're probably going to see some impact. But yes, on the big trucks, the weight restriction had a much bigger impact on it than COVID did. So I'll put the numbers together and we can take a look at them and see what the trends show.
I thought the trucks were more than 5% of the revenues.
Relatively small.
If it's a relatively small number, then this is not going to make a difference in our revenues.
It adds
We're
up.
talking about a portion of 5%.
It's a small portion.
And I'm guessing, Ben, you're kind of trying to get an idea of price sensitivity with the toll increase.
I think a combination of price sensitivity with toll increase. It's something that's come up just conversationally a couple times, just as like, how has the price increase changed how people use and think about the bridge? And then also just from a macro standpoint, understanding like what has the growth of traffic looked like, just over the last couple of years, or even like, I'd be curious over the last 10 years, just so that as we're kind of modeling things out, we can think about, what would potential continued change in the gorge look like from a revenue standpoint.
I would suggest that you get through Mike to Carrie, because there was a toll traffic study done by Washington State.
Okay.
That went back a number of years. And
was he
Carrie, take a look at that.
I see you talking, Carrie, but it's not coming through. Carrie, can you hear me? We can't hear you.
He's not muted though.
No, you're not muted, but I cannot hear you.
He's miming.
Pretty thin on details there. They just extrapolate.
How about now?
There you
Helps if I put my microphone in front of my mouth. So a lot of the questions that you were asking are actually examined pretty thoroughly in the traffic and revenue study. And I can go to that document and try to pick out some of the data. But that's actually a good read if you're interested in taking a deep dive into this kind of thing, because it looks back, it looks back 10, 15 years and looks forward 30 years based on economic projection, accepted economic projections, and inflation projections and all that go into their modeling of what traffic would look like. I just wanted to also caution that, truck traffic, commercial traffic may be 5% of your traffic. That doesn't necessarily mean it's 5% of your revenue, because you got to remember the bigger trucks pay a much higher toll. So you can have a small percentage of your vehicles accounting for a significantly larger part of your revenue.
What I would say, warn people, it's, as you know, any 2 points define a line, and it's much too easy to draw conclusions from very minimal data. A couple of years ago, I got all the toll data back to 2000 and looked through it and found that it's just very noisy data. So to think that you can take a handful of years and draw any meaningful conclusions, I highly recommend that you depend on the professionals who did the TNR study, and not try to re-establish that or draw any conclusions based on very limited information that we have today.
It would be interesting to look at a study versus actual what's happening, what we've seen. Because,
that is a good correlation. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's also bring them on, and they'll take that study and get even deeper dive into the numbers when they do the investment grade. So
for those of you, those of you who are wondering about the investment grade traffic and revenue study, it's going to be like the study you just saw on steroids, because when you're actually going to a lender attempting to borrow money for 30 years, the rigor that they're going to require in these studies and the documentation of your sources of assumptions and those kinds of things are much higher.
Okay, I'm going to push us along because we have a presentation and we're getting down on time. And so One Gorge is going to give us a non-20-minute presentation.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to go over to the board. This reminds me of when I was a professor for 20 years. And I taught at night, 6:30 to 9:15. And I resurrected the Friday night class. So you're all at 8:30 p.m. on Friday night. You worked all day, you ran home, fed the kids, you didn't feed yourself, you're exhausted, right? So let's take it through. I'm Liz Wilbur with me. How do you, for whoever's taking the minutes? I'm with One Gorge. And you can find us at onegorge.org, but I don't recommend going there because we're a little delayed in updating the site. I'll explain why in a minute. You can email me at onegorgeinfo@gmail. It's messy. Handwriting never improved in these 20 years. We're going to give you some info, and while I do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what One Gorge is, and then Jen's going to tell you a little bit about the history. So the way that I describe One Gorge to people, I'm the administrator. These are my personal business cards. I'm the administrator of One Gorge. I was the co-administrator until last week when Wanda Sharp, anybody know Wanda, decided to go be Kevin Waters' legislative assistant. So she has abandoned me forever. I've only been the administrator for about a week. Not even. I'm co-administrator just for a few months, so I cannot answer all of your questions. But the way that I describe One Gorge to people is that we are a group. We are not a 501c3. We are a loose group of about 200 people who advocate for the Gorge. The leadership team, that would be me, Jen, maybe Mark Johnson, question mark, was Brittany until she left us. Buck with CritFic is on the leadership team. Tamara with Mount Adams Chamber of Commerce is on the leadership team. And there's somebody else who hasn't been super active, who's thank you, also on the leadership team. Anyway, we're desperate for people to be on the leadership team. So if you're interested to be on the leadership team, please let us know. We meet once a month. I run the meetings and I try to make them pretty exciting. So what do we do? So we heard about One Gorge, Gorgeous Nights, the Gorgeous Night event in Olympia and Salem, that's us. We put that on. We're doing it now every other year. We're doing it the longer legislative sessions because the shorter ones just don't have enough time. We are planning on having a presence this year. We're talking about that a little bit more at our full meeting on the 20th. If you want to be added to the list, the email list, I email very infrequently, but it includes invites to the general meetings, which we're doing once a quarter right now. We had an in-person meeting in September. On the 20th, we're having a meeting from 3 to 5 online. So you don't even have to get out of your seats to come. But if you email me, I'll put you on the list for that as well. That's going to be a planning meeting primarily for what we're going to be doing in February in both Salem and Olympia. One of the other things that we do quite a lot of is we send out letters. So we sent out a few letters in the last few months to get signatures. So that's something that we do. We're a conduit for that as well. We are made up of private businesses, nonprofits, government, kind of you name it. There's anybody can be a member of One Gorge. What I've given you was the 2022 legislative priorities that the group had come up with. Our plan for updating for 2025 is that we're going to survey the membership and find out what their legislative priorities are. For 2024, we're really going to focus on transportation, primarily the bridge replacement, and then also start talking about some money for Bridge of the Gods, the seismic retrofit, and then they also want the pedestrian / cycling lane, or I was an English professor, I don't know what these things are called, as well. So those are some of the things that we're going to be talking about for this upcoming year. We have a video you can access at the website from 2021. A lot of the players in that video are no longer elected officials. So we are going to be updating it this year for 2025. The plan is that we're going to do an updated short 2 to 3 minute video for this legislative session coming up. And then we're going to completely overhaul the video, potentially working with you all and what you have and some other entities to come up with something. I have volunteered to put my hiking gear on and walk across Bridge of the Gods to illustrate the need for that lane, even though I have terrible vertigo. So if anybody wants to volunteer to be a friendly vehicle driving at me, please let me know, because that's my plan. So, in a nutshell, we are a loose advocacy group for all things Gorge. I mean, that's my elevator speech. So Jen has been involved with One Gorge from the beginning, so she can talk briefly about a little bit of the history.
I'll talk a little bit about the initial idea of it was to raise awareness in the capitals in Olympia and Salem for gorge issues. And the reason it's an informally organized group is actually intentional. When we first in 2015 realized that there were so many different groups in the gorge that were going to the capitals and going to DC advocating for projects in their neighborhood, in their town, we were crossing each other in the hallways and thinking, hey, we should have kind of met before we got here so we could reinforce our message together, so we can cheer on your project in Mosier and Mosier can cheer on Bingen and we can work together. So we started to explore what that would look like and intentionally chose not to be a representative government. Nobody wanted anybody saying, everybody in the gorge is for this issue, because 6 people on one gorge said that we were. So it's actually an informally organized group that's sort of founded on this idea of communities of practice. So you can imagine engineers at different firms that get together socially, talk about what they're working on, how to, support each other. These are professionals in the gorge who all work on advocacy in the state legislatures primarily, getting together, meeting regularly to talk about what we're working on, how we can help. One of the things we want to do is provide a platform for communities that have projects that need funding or policy change to be able to get some more awareness in the capitals. And that's why we do the letters. When we first started out in 2015, we actually collected pictures of everybody's signature. And we had a system in place where if you were in favor of whatever we're writing a letter support, you could say, add my signature. And we literally dragged a picture of your signature onto the letter. But we also wanted to implement a way for somebody to go, hey, slow down, yellow light, red light. This issue is a problem for us. It's not necessarily a unanimous thing. And one example was we were advocating in Washington for funding for the overpass or the crossing, the railroad crossing down to Eagle Point in Bingen for safety reasons. And we had developed, with the help of Betty Barnes, we had developed the letter of support for it. And the problem was that at that time, the NSF would take away a crossing if they gave you a crossing. And this was a significant concern for SDS. And so we were trying to get Jason Spadero's signature on this letter. And he said, I will sign it if you will just change that letter to say, and preserve all existing crossings. That's all that we had to do to get this really strong letter of support, and that funding was eventually awarded. So that's just an example. From the beginning, bridge replacement has been shown as one of our #1 priorities. We've also advocated for search and rescue funding on both sides of the river, support for mutual support agreements on both sides of the river, that sort of a thing. And so I think we have about 220 people on our email list. It's a nice way to activate action. It's a nice little organizing feature. It's case-by-case participation. We don't have a bank account. We don't have a board. We don't have membership dues. People come and go as they please, as they have issues, and can find support through that vehicle.
But we will take money.
Yeah.
We do need money, because videos aren't cheap. And we do gorgeous nights, and we do spend some money. Yeah. So we are happy to take all kinds of donations, including monetary, in kind. And I need help. I mean, that's like our leadership team has like literally been halved in 2 weeks. And we meet once a month for maybe 2 hours, to talk about the priorities, to try to get things in action. And then we meet as a group about, it's ishy right now because Wanda and I had taken over, and we're really trying to, it is informal, but Wanda and I are not informal people. So, just trying to formalize processes and procedures. The problem is, and this is something you were talking about earlier, we all have jobs, like we're volunteers and we all have jobs. And so trying to find the time, that's why the website is dated. Because the previous people doing this, just, between working and trying to do all the things one board requires, haven't had a chance to update the website. So I'm also looking for somebody to help me update the website and do this and that. I have, and I'll tapped into somebody to maybe help me be a co-administrator. We'll see if he's willing or not. I work in Stevenson, and I live in the western part of Skamania County. If you're familiar with 14 at all. The house that used to be the gas station across from the Iris farm, that's my house. We bought that 3.5 years ago. So I don't know any of you, except Michael, thank you for the invitation, and Jen, so feel free, if you have time after, introduce yourselves to me, let me know who you are. We're trying to get more representation in the group from this side of the river in general. Skamania is being beefed up a bit because Wanda and I are both from there, but Klickitat County doesn't have a whole lot of representation. The other thing I just wanted to toss on here was my cell phone number, my personal number, so that you have it. I gave you my business card, just in case you're interested. People for People is a part of the WorkSource system. We help people get employed. We do all kinds of grants. We can provide money to people who are eligible for training. Retraining, help people find jobs. We do a lot of great things. It's an office right up the street here in White Snow as well. So I think that is everything on my list. Does anybody have any questions?
I would like to add, from the project standpoint, we go to One Gorge when we need letters of support for our grants. So it's a really convenient way to go to one place and get 15 or 20 signatures on a letter of support from business owners and all kinds of different groups. So we use that to do that for the project, as well as what we had been talking about. And this goes to the communications group, was maybe combining efforts on the next video that we're doing with Story Gorge to kind of get two things out of it. One is to use it when One Gorge is doing their advocacy at Salem and Olympia. But then that kind of be our contribution to One Gorge, is to help them with maybe pieces of our video to help them supplement their videos. So that was kind of the thought, is instead of monitoring, maybe we can do something like that where we help them create this video or use part of our video as part of their video. So but I would like to connect them with the communications group to have that conversation.
And we really would like to be a community partner. We do have a Facebook page. We do have the emails that we can send out. We do have the website. There is a news page on the website. And when we kind of come across information about the bridge replacement, for example, Wanda's been putting it up there. I don't have Wanda anymore, but instead of us trying to find information, if you just send it to here, then we can put it on there pretty quickly and easily. So, there are a lot of moving pieces, and because we're volunteers like you all, it can be hard to, kind of put it all together, especially for one person. But like I said, I'm hoping to maybe have somebody come on board to help me co-administer. She and I were dividing based on our strengths, and it was working really, really well. And we would love to have another member on the leadership team, because they're the team that really guides. They have the historical knowledge that really help, guide our focus. You can see the priorities. Like I said, some of those will remain, I'm sure, through 2024 and 2025. One thing I really want to make sure it's highlighted in the short video we're planning on doing for this upcoming legislative session is the Cook Underwood fire. Effective transportation, it closed down 14. Try to get a soundbite from Summer Shire about that, and kind of go from there. So
it's important that everybody know the Gorgeous Nights receptions. They're in Salem and Olympia. They're a partnership of One Gorge and the legislators. So our representatives for our region in Salem and Oregon, they're actually the hosts of that event, and they invite all of their colleagues in the legislature and their staffs to come listen, come see my Gorge people. We're throwing a party tonight. You're gonna get some door prizes, but also hear what's important to them in the Gorge. And it's a really neat partnership because we get to work with them throughout the year to plan this party that they are hosting.
So, and it's very well attended. So what we'll be doing this year is, we have not yet established a date. That's something we'll talk about on the 20th. And if your Washington lobbyist wants to, coordinate with me, because why duplicate? Because we're planning on sending a group. I do have some beer and wine left over from September, and we were going to try to get some more wine and some other things and do some baskets. Something, keep it under $50, so don't report it. But so we have some general ideas. We don't have a whole lot of time. So that's kind of where we're hoping. So any other,
Questions?
yeah. Questions,
Questions?
anybody?
My question, who is your fiscal sponsor?
The Mount Adams Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
Good. Yes, because we don't have money, but we do get money. Yeah, so the Port of Hood River and the Port of Cascade Locks each give us $2,500 a year. That's sort of our guaranteed funding. We don't get anything from the Washington side, which I think we need to work on. And we also have people who just kind of give us donations. We do get a lot of in-kind donations. I mean, when we were soliciting for Gorgeous Nights, the stuff we got was just unbelievable. One of the changes too we're talking about doing is for Gorgeous Nights in 2025, charging people per table, because, you know, a nominal fee to have a table there, because there's a lot of people who just sort of descend last minute. And there's like 5 of us who bought everything, brought everything, set up everything. I mean, it's you know, and just to get some funding to support all of that, you know, it's not inexpensive. In Salem, they have a space and it's a little bit more streamlined, but it was interesting last year. Any other questions? I don't want to tell you, I know we're short on time, but I really do appreciate the opportunity. It's a great organization. That's why we give our time to it. And I think it can do a lot more. And that's one of the goals that I have for it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, next up, our next meeting is going to be Monday, January 8th, 2023. I guess not. How'd you do that?
Did you like that?
Yeah. Here from 2 to 4. Is there anything else from any members for roundtable or online?
One last thing for people to think about is as we start the new year in the interim roles, there were a few things that we need to talk about in January. One is the upcoming board members. So be thinking about your involvement over the next couple of years. We also need to have a discussion about the board co-chairs and assigning them to 2-year and 4-year terms, but also talking to the counties about reappointing people for 2-year and 4-year assignments. So just be thinking about that. We'll have those conversations in January. So,
and I haven't seen any invitation to our holiday party.
So you're happy.
Next Monday night, I'm just having a toy drive. Come on down.
And
Arthur's house.
No, it'll be fire truck for the kids. It'll be good.
I don't know. The other thing is a regular board meeting time. We should adopt one for 2024. So we got the location now. We need to figure out day and time.
I say that we can work that into the bylaws.
That's fine.
Which we'll be establishing in the month of January.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Anything else from anyone online? Like Catherine, nothing? Okay. All right. With that, if there's no issues, we are going to declare this adjourned at 4:11.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Have a happy holidays.